Let's see.
Well, happy birthday.
Thanks.
You guys like 33?
No,
34.
34.
Oh.
Yep.
I remember 34 a long time ago.
Longer than me.
Yep.
Right.
Speaking of selling the wreaths, when I came into Scouts, I had to sell for 2 because as the little younger brother, that was sort of the, you go sell the wreaths and I'll go deliver them. Well, it's just total BS because all you do is drive around and then make me get out of the car and run them up and schlep into people's doors, which back then was
call
like,
that delegation.
Yeah. Back then, digital currency, you had to collect checks or collect cash. Now everything's Venmo, which is fantastic. So by the time we go and deliver the wreaths, 98% of them have already been paid for, which it's made as a parent when you have to front the money.
Oh my gosh,
it makes life a lot better.
So we're selling Girl Scout wreaths Girl Scout cookies for my daughter, and it's hard to collect everything, and I can't imagine how much money our dad would lose and mom would lose every year on wreaths, selling 133 times 3, and just the last 70 we would say we sold them, but just try to find people after you got them to take them in, and I'm sure he's losing quite a bit every year on it.
I went to the sales team and said, "Hey guys, here's a bunch of wreaths. Give these out to customers."
Right. Oh yeah, our Kennedy tank on our property, we'd have 30 wreaths hung everywhere. Every door had a wreath on it, that's for sure.
Like, yeah, he sure is festive.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we talk about selling Christmas wreaths all the time, but this is the first time in probably 10 years I even put any thought towards delivering the wreaths, because that was a hell of a, that was an unbelievable experience, because you had to get the checks, but also just putting that many wreaths in the back of a pickup truck and trying to figure out which ones go to who was, that was like a 3-weekend process.
Yeah. So fast forward 10 to 15 years, will drones be delivering the wreaths then?
Man, I hope if my boys in Boy Scouts, I hope that's the truth.
That'd be funny. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Industrious Podcast. Thank you for joining us from wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're joining us on the Accessa YouTube channel, thank you for doing so. If you haven't subscribed on there, please do so. It's free of charge, so we'd really appreciate it. Today we've got double your pleasure with the Kennedy twin boys, Bill and Jim Kennedy. Welcome to the Industrious Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wish I already knew that. That was kind of well planned. I would have had something else for them, but next time. We'll let you guys fight over who gets to do the cool introduction, but why don't you guys give us a little background on yourselves?
Great. Well, I'm Bill Kennedy and president of Kennedy Tank. I'm married to my wife, Ellen. We started dating at Bishop Chatard High School back in, 2005, and have been married eight years. Have 4 young kids, a second grader at IHM, a kindergartner, then a 5-year-old boy, and a 2-year-old girl. And belong to Highland, play golf at Highland, and also big members of IHM and the Chatard communities. But we work at Kennedy Tank. I'm the president of our 5th generation family-owned business. We have about 225 employees, 3 different locations, and business has been really good to us the past couple of years. And I'll hand it over to my twin brother, Jimmy.
Yep, and I'm Jim Kennedy. It's great to be on the podcast. I went to IU. I am the vice president of sales at Kennedy Tank. I've been at Kennedy Tank about 5 years. Really lucky to be on the team, and we do have a cool history that we'll discuss today. I am married to my wife, Anna Grace Kennedy, and have a son, Patrick Kennedy, who's 17 months and 3 days.
Nice.
So, yeah, diehard IU fan, especially IU basketball, and hoping for a stronger finish to the year than the start has been. But thanks for having us on.
The defense helps.
Yeah.
I mean, playing
the Wisconsin game
defense
was good.
helps.
Yeah, defense was much better.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw someone describe Wisconsin basketball as, hopefully this isn't offending listeners here, but they refer to Wisconsin brand of basketball as dry humping. I was like, I never would have thought about that, but if you think about it, that's dead true, because it's the most boring version of basketball ever to watch. And for IU to finally beat them, because it seems like it's been 100 years, with a legitimate score, like a legitimate beatdown, was kind of nice to see.
So Jimmy and I have season tickets, 10th row behind the bucket, 4 together. And I told my wife at the start of this season, no matter what we have on the calendar, I am going to the IU Wisconsin game, because personally, I have lost the last 9 IU Wisconsin games that I've attended. So it's good to finally win one. Right. 1 for 9 now.
Agreed. I almost wasn't going to go because the way we played the last couple of games is like, I'm done.
Right.
And Maddie, who was home from Tennessee, was like, I really want to go to that game. I'm like, all right, fine, let's go. And I'm glad we did.
Yeah, that was a hell of a second half.
Yeah.
I would like to personally reach out and thank Maddie for sending Tavon Jackson from Tennessee to IU.
Yes,
she goes to Tennessee. She's a ball.
She is, yeah. She was not real happy when that news broke. But
do you think that she could send a left tackle, a left guard, a right tackle, right guard, maybe a center?
Yeah, that was my one response to that tweet. I think Tom Allen put out, I was like, now can we protect him, please?
Right.
That'd be great.
Yep. Absolutely.
So we'll see what happens. Well, cool. What can you guys tell us about Kennedy Tank? The average listener may not be familiar with you guys. You want to kind of provide some history on what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a 5th generation family-owned business, and we fabricate steel tanks, shell and tube heat exchangers, ASME pressure vessels, and we have a field arm that erects large field-erected tanks at our customer sites. And our great-great-grandfather started the business in 1898. We have 2 other locations. Our great-grandfather started Southern Tank in Owensboro, Kentucky, that's still operated and owned by the Kennedy family and operated by great people down there, about 40 people at that business. And our grandpa started Staffco, Steel Tank and Fabricating Corp., which is a steel tank fabricating business in Columbia City, Indiana, with about 25 employees. And we mostly build or weld and fabricate tanks, vessels, shell and tube heat exchangers for the chemical and petrochemical industry. And like I said earlier, we have about 225 employees when you consider all 3 businesses and the field arm of Kennedy Tank.
Right. Do you still operate all 3 like completely independently, or are they kind of under the same umbrella? Or
they're under the same umbrella, but operated independently. We have really veteran and great employees at all 3 sites, and we always say they're more capable of, choosing the right answers than we would be trying to micromanage from Indy.
Sure. 5th generation is not easy. I mean, there's not that many businesses out there that survive that long or make it that long for any number of different reasons. What would you guys say has kind of been the secret sauce for that to continue to go?
Correct. So we're entering our 125th year this year, and obviously our great-great-grandfather started the business, and we're a part of the 5th generation. I'm president of the company. Jimmy's our vice president of sales. Our younger brother Patrick's a welder out in our manufacturing shop, and our cousin Kevin Bullen is an estimator for us in the office. And, every generation of Kennedys had different challenges they had to overcome to pass it to the next. But overall, I would say it's a commitment by the family, and especially the family members who've worked in the business the last 5 generations, to really want to keep it going, to want it to continue to grow, and to make good long-term decisions that have allowed the next generation to come behind them.
Right, yeah. We just finished 2022. You said you had last couple of years have been really good. Anything in particular that really drives your guys' business?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Vince. So right now, really in 2023, we're in such a sweet spot when it comes to the tank and vessel industry, because we're doing a lot of business with a lot of old school industries such as refineries, steel mills, but now we're getting involved in a lot of this renewable work.
Okay.
So we're working with plants that are turning landfill plastics into biofuels, and also doing a lot of different innovative recycling processes that are just getting started here in the U.S. A lot of these processes are big overseas, but now that they're getting started, we're really getting the best of both worlds, which has really helped us because we have a great customer base that have been with us a long time. They really value the quality of the work that we do. But now that we're getting in front of new customers in these exciting spaces, the sky truly is the limit.
And I would say since the pandemic started, the United States finally figured out that we needed to start manufacturing things again. And a lot of our customers, instead of relying on China and overseas countries, are bringing manufacturing back, and they're building onto their sites. They're ordering more tanks, vessels, and to have more control of their whole pipeline. And no matter what industry we're in, our customer base has just been expanding in the last 3 years, and it's been a fun ride to be a part of.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned reshoring, just because I know in our industries, selling chemicals or paints to manufacturers in the last 3 years, probably, pandemic aside, we've started to get inquiries from jobs or companies that typically aren't still being done here in the U.S., which has been interesting to see. And we've been talking about reshoring for probably the last decade, but I think there's been some real momentum, and it sounds like you guys are seeing the same thing.
Yes.
We absolutely are. And, as Bill's answer to the first question, really, the difference at Kennedy Tank is our people. So I was at Cars.com for about 6 years in Chicago and Denver doing advertising, sales, and a couple sales roles. And Cars.com is a wonderful company, and the people just do a tremendous job. But going from, an office job where your typical day, you're in the office at 8:30, you're out the door right at 5, to Kennedy Tank where half our employees are at work at 5 a.m. Their alarm clocks, most our employees' alarm clocks goes off actually in the 3s because they have to drive an hour to get to work. And they work till 4, but if you'll let them work till 5:30 and earn some overtime, they certainly will. And our office is as dedicated as well as any office team I've been around. So that's been a huge part. It obviously helps that the fact that, just our clothes, for example, the raw material in our clothes, all of the raw materials for this shirt was in a tank or a vessel at some point. So certainly it helps that the market has stayed strong and there's such a need for our products. But it really comes down to those people, and obviously the family's been very important, but also non-family members truly treat Kennedy Tank like they're a part of the ownership group, which is our big difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well, it's obviously there's a touch of pride when you say fifth generation, because it's something you've repeated and it's certainly understandable. As it's sort of a general rule of thumb, there are a lot of family businesses that never make it past the third generation. And you commented this in your intro on the idea that family members from generation to generation, the older generation makes it a point to have something to pass on to the younger generation and obviously instill something in them. So what was it for you guys as you're growing up, particularly in your high school years and in undergraduate, that said, okay, maybe I want to join the family business at some point? Like what drove that?
Right. So our father, obviously, he unfortunately passed away at the beginning of COVID, but he was our fourth generation president for 25 years. And Jimmy and I and our younger brother, Patrick, who works at Kennedy Tank, we all just loved our dad. And we grew up playing basketball very competitively. And Dad, he would, rebound out in our front yard. We had a full court with lights and everything. And we spent so much time with our dad when he was outside of work that really growing up, I just always wanted to spend more time with him and work with him professionally. Because like I tell our team members all the time, we spend more time with each other than we do our families a lot of the time, with how many hours and how hard we all work together. But the interesting thing, growing up in high school and everything, our dad put zero pressure on us to join the family business. And he would even tell us that, I think you guys can make more money outside the family business than you can inside if you work, as good or as highly as I think of you guys, that you could work your way up the chain of a publicly traded company based in Indianapolis and do really, really well. But we always just were grown to him. And when I graduated from Bloomington, I went to IU and studied finance down there at that beautiful place. Our dad had a clause that said any family members had to graduate from college, work outside the business for 2 years, and then interview with the executive team if a position opened up. And I got an internship and then did a full-time job in Louisville for 2 years, and then proposed to my wife, got married, and started my MBA. But I always, even in high school and college, although we'd never talk about it openly, I always wanted to be a part of the business to spend more time with him.
Yeah, which is really interesting because my dad was an only son, and he grew up even as early as late high school painting tanks.
Okay.
So whenever he was trying to make a buck, and definitely in college, he was at the plant painting tanks, kind of offhandedly learning the business. But I am eternally grateful for him not pushing it upon us, which is why all of us really went elsewhere first and then ended up kind of organically coming back home to what we believe is the greatest city in the United States, Indianapolis, and working for Kennedy Tank.
Yeah. I kudos to your dad, because I've talked to, let's say, young kids like you guys. I was 16 when you were born, which makes me feel really old. But kids who are all like us, they have a family business, they have the opportunity where they could go straight out of college and into it. But if I ever get the opportunity to talk to them, I recommend, just like your dad did, go somewhere else. Go cut your teeth on someone else's dime. Because let's face it, I mean, at 22, we don't know what the hell we're doing.
Right.
And half of us don't even know what we still want to do. So go kind of figure things out somewhere else and really determine, do you want to then come back and join it? Sometimes you may not. And I think more times than not, it has worked itself out and probably been better off for folks to do that. So I'm glad your dad had mentioned that, and you guys also kind of followed suit with that. That's good.
So on the business side, we touched, or Vince used the word, I was going to use reshoring, which you touched on, which sounds like a catalyst of, obviously, with COVID and resulting supply chain issues, which were probably already sort of going to emerge at some point. It just got exacerbated very quickly by a global pandemic. I assume that there's still some carryover from 21, 22 going into 23 from demand on that. But what does the crystal ball look like for you guys for 23? What are some of your greatest opportunities that you see coming down this next 12 months? And probably what are your greatest concerns or challenges that you foresee?
Yeah, it's interesting. Really, when COVID hit, we all thought the worst. And frankly, after about a 6-month kind of gray period, demand just continued to rise, which we definitely didn't see. And then it got to the point in I would say late 2021 to halfway through 2022, where customers didn't even care what the price was. They needed the product. And we were getting POs. Honestly, we were 30, 40% busier than we'd ever been. And we were getting orders pretty much sight unseen. And I think now, as we transition to a more normal supply chain, as deliveries kind of scale back and actually improve, customers are still moving forward with projects in numerous industries, but they are starting to look at costs specifically. So I think that fun period is probably over. We're still in a good market, we think, outside of interest rates, economy, stock market, et cetera. We think a lot of capital projects are going to move forward, especially thanks to the Indiana Economic Development Committee. I want to give a shout out to them, because the amount of companies coming to Indiana is bonkers when it comes to manufacturing. So we expect this year to be a good year. We are about 25% busier than we've been in the past 10 years on average right now, which is down a little bit from where we were a year ago, but still it's a wonderful place to start, and we think it'll be really strong.
Yeah, I agree with that. We think it's still a really solid market. It's not as crazy and bonkers, like Jimmy says, as it was there for 9 months, but we continue to be extremely busy, working a lot of overtime, hiring, building a lot of tanks, and welding like crazy.
Yeah, it's been interesting. One piece of our puzzle is obviously the material market. So we build tanks and vessels of carbon steel, stainless steel, exotic alloys that range from 40 cents a pound all the way up to about $8 a pound.
Okay.
In post-COVID, that the pricing, not only demand, but pricing for those products due to war in Ukraine, et cetera, really went through the roof. And there's still, depending on what you're looking at, it's either double or 2.5 times the historical price, which honestly kind of helps us, because a tank that used to cost $20,000 is now maybe $27,000, and you're still marking it up a certain percent, which hopefully will add to the bottom line.
Right.
But our industry is unique. It's really a lot of family businesses, kind of like Kennedy Tank. We're definitely, when it comes to tank and vessel fabricators, we're on the larger end. We're not the largest, but certainly on the larger end. And it's a lot of just wonderful people that work hard. It's not a lot of big corporations, which kind of plays into our unique advantage by using technology, bettering our processes internally to make us the best we can be.
Yeah. How have you guys seen raw material supplies? Is it starting to get better?
It is.
I think it definitely is compared to some of the worst parts of COVID.
Steel's
Stainless
coming down a little bit.
Carbon steel's definitely coming down, but we do about half our work in carbon, half our work in stainless. Stainless, again, has just the last couple of weeks, nickel has really risen quite a bit, which has caused stainless to jump up again. It's pretty much at an all-time high now, but we at least can get the material, and if we can get it, we can build it.
We got a slight price decrease on 5-gallon steel pails, so that was a nice start.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
I haven't heard that in a while.
Now, of course, the same hour that I got that email, I had 4 other emails with price increases on other materials. So, it's good with the bad.
Yep.
We talked about your dad a little bit. I had the pleasure of knowing your dad. Couple things I wanted to ask you. So we had a prior guest, was a buddy of mine who was in a somewhat similar role as you guys, was in the family business. Probably a plan in place, but certainly was premature, and his father passed away unexpectedly and kind of thrust him into a role that he might have been destined for, but not at that point in time. I don't know how far along your guys' plan was, if that plan existed, and certainly your father's passing was not planned. So 2 things. One, kudos to you guys for stepping in, and it's been a little bit of time now, and I've from what I've seen from the outside, things haven't really missed a beat and are plugging away. So kudos to you guys for doing that. But how would you say? Obviously, it was a very difficult time, but how would you say that whole process went? Do you think you were well set up for that transition, or was it like, oh shit, now what do we do?
Right. Yeah. Let me talk on this real quick. Really, was there a plan in place? Yes, there probably was, but we are so fortunate to have Bill as our leader. So it was truly a no-brainer. So Bill had been with the company about 7 years prior, had ran our manufacturing, started in purchasing, had bettered our manufacturing from what I used to call, we were the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now we're the Dallas Cowboys, especially when the Cowboys are good. Obviously, we hope to become the old New England Patriots. But Bill had been such a vital...
Or the old Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, or the old Colts. But Bill had been such a vital part of bettering our entire process. We all knew that, whether it was 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever that time frame was, he was going to lead the company. So when, unfortunately, Dad passed, there was really no decision to be made. If you had interviewed 250 employees, 250 would have said... this is a no-brainer. Bill's the best guy to move us forward.
Yeah.
And thanks to that, and thanks to the entire team, the executive team, which Bill will talk about, is a good mix of young and old. The company has just moved forward at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jim. And it was just a shocking time when Dad, obviously, was right at the beginning of COVID in April of 2020. And, back then you weren't even able to get tested for it. All the ERs were full. They really weren't accepting people, and it was just a real tough deal. Our dad was healthier than we both are, less than 10% body fat, worked out twice a day, and just unfortunately the mix of his genetic makeup and that virus just went downhill, and it went extremely fast. So we sure do miss him, but our team came together, the family included. Everyone was on the same page. Everyone knew the right decisions that need to be made, and we just moved on right away, continued his legacy forward. And for us, obviously losing our dad at such a young age is very sad, and we think about him absolutely constantly, but we know what he would want us to do, which is take care of the business, move forward, work hard, treat people fairly. And his gravesite's within a mile of Kennedy Tank, so we always feel that he's with us and help us make good decisions and move the business forward. And it's been a hell of a run. Then everyone at Kennedy Tank will tell you that. We really haven't lost a beat, and we've improved in a lot of different ways. And just finished up our fiscal year. It was our best year ever by a wide margin, and we're optimistic about 2023.
So going through that whole experience on a professional level, anything you learned that you would want to pass along to anybody else who might find themselves in the same situation?
Show up. The COVID was really difficult, and it was really difficult when Dad passed. But the year after that, or the 18 months or 2 years after that, it really wasn't that much easier because we have 225 employees. Yeah. People are getting COVID. The hardest part about COVID, I would say, is the different ways people reacted to it. You had both pendulums, some people would react one way, the other people would react the other way. You wanted to treat everyone fairly and protect our teammates, but it was just different. It was like the song that never ends, almost, that every day and every week we would be dealing with different issues. And what I would tell a young leader who had to face anything similar is, 1, just do the best you can. 2, show up every day, work hard. 3, treat people fairly. And 4, and I think this happened quite a bit during the pandemic, leaders didn't know, the government didn't know the answers. So leaders at family businesses that have 225 employees, guess what? They didn't either. But it is okay to say you do not know, and that you don't have all the answers. And looking back, I think any leader leading through the pandemic would probably say they wish they did that a little bit more, because the whole thing was just a total mess.
Yeah, I listened to your story, and you have 2 business school case studies that are very serious situations mashed into one, like, ultimate case study. So it's incredibly impressive to hear your answers, both on the professional side and, of course, the personal side. I mean, you can hear it in your voice. And I think from our experience, we would agree with you guys on the comment you made. It seemed like from April of 20 and the 6 months that followed that were certainly very challenging, because, as you noted, there was a lot of unknown. Mm-hmm. And all we could do from our business, I was just try to find some sort of guiding light or some sort of principle and stick to that and be consistent with it. But then beyond that, going into 21 and all of 22, while business was very strong because demand was off the charts, it was probably more challenging than that 6 months of depth of COVID, because it was, as you mentioned, sales this January aren't as strong as last January, but they're still very strong historically. And in a way, as much as I don't like saying, man, having a little bit less revenue is good, it's kind of like you can breathe a little bit, because the 21, 22 pace, no way anyone, from speaking on my own behalf, no way I could have sustained that.
Right.
Because it was just bananas.
Yes.
So it's almost refreshing. Misery loves company in a way, right? It's refreshing to hear everyone's stories and it's okay. Yeah, we can commiserate on those things. Really good things going on. A lot of problems, most of which were good, but nonetheless problems, and it puts a little age on you for sure. Mm-hmm. So more so for him than it does for me, but that's how it works.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I hope we never have to go through another pandemic again.
No kidding. Yeah. I have a question to segue to a much lighter side, or a much lighter conversation. You guys are a big racing family. You have a history there that goes back many decades. Mm-hmm. Before asking my questions, if you could tell the listeners the story of how that all kind of started, the race car, the famous or infamous race car, the Kennedy Special. Would love to hear that.
Yes. Well, we love the Indianapolis 500. We have over 100 tickets for every race. We caravan about 25 cars together, meet at 5 a.m. at our aunt and uncle's house, the Fairchilds, and caravan and all park together.
They're Christmas wreath customers, by the way.
Good. About 70 of us sit together, and the other 30 sit all over, and we have a big breakfast tailgate before the race. But the funnest tailgate is the post-race tailgate. So we'll be out in Lot 2 until about 11 p.m. every race night. We'll have a bunch of speakers, beer die, flip cup, beer pong, you name it. We play it, and there'll be 300-400 people that all meet in Lot 2 after the race. So you guys, I know you're big IndyCar fans, race fans. Lot 2 after the race. Please join us.
PM, I'm sure.
Please join
Speedway
us.
Police or the yellow shirts love you guys.
Oh yeah. But we Kennedy Tank used to sponsor cars in the Indianapolis 500 from 1936 to 1952. Our best finish that the Kennedy Tank Special placed was 8th, and that was we started 14th, finished 8th in 1946, which was great for us. But my dad wrote 2 books on the Indianapolis 500. One is a 500 question trivia book. The other is a Cliff Notes version of every single race. And about 4 months after he wrote his first trivia book, someone calls my dad on his work phone and says, "Hey, we have your car." And he goes, "What? You don't have my car? I'm looking at it right out the window. It's in the parking lot." He goes, and he says, "No, I think I have your Kennedy Tank Special race car. I've read your book." So my dad and a group drove out to Illinois and inspected the car. It was not in very good shape, but they were able to confirm that it was the actual car that we sponsored in the Indy 500. Kennedy Tank purchased the car and refurbished it to its original condition. It sits in our lobby. Anyone's welcome to come see it. And it still drives at almost 140 miles an hour. And, we love Roger Penske and that whole group. But before their ownership started, we were able to take it out to the track 2 or 3 times a year and run it with all the old cars. And it was an absolute blast. It was my dad's favorite thing to do. And we'd always say it was the most dangerous thing you could ever do, watching your dad actually go 140 miles an hour in a car with a leather helmet that has a handbrake and is shaking the whole time.
Yeah. So the Kennedy Tank Special, which we have in our lobby, as Bill mentioned, ran in 1948. So Les Anderson out of Portland, Oregon, built the car, drove it. It actually ran in 48 and 49. So in 48, he drove it, finished in the 20s. In 49, he couldn't get the speed that needed to qualify, because back then you had much more, obviously, than I think sometimes you had over 60 cars qualifying.
Right.
So another gentleman drove it in 49, and the qualifying speed was like I think they got it up to 150, but it was around 130 average lap.
Yeah.
So our dad, as Bill mentioned, favorite thing to do in the world, a couple times a year would get out there, and especially a couple years ago, there weren't a whole lot of rules and speed limits associated with the laps that he ran. And so I qualified in 48, 49 at 130, and Dad was going about 120 on the straights. And we would time it and kind of wave to him. And, at the start he was waving. By the end, he was white knuckling it.
Yep.
But that was his heaven. And we would get to the track on Fast Friday. Literally, we'd go to Charlie Brown's, get there right at 6 a.m., be at the track by 6:30 to watch him with about 10 other people. And you just had the ultimate respect for him. And Dad always kind of he was a very charismatic guy, certainly loved by so many, but he had a glow about him at the track. And there was nothing, I still haven't seen anything like it. People just were absorbed to him. And I want to say he went to 59 straight Indy 500s, 59 or 60. It's right around that.
Yeah, 57. I think.
Was it 57? Okay. Which just shows there was nothing quite like it.
Yeah. When was the last time that car's been on the track?
So just before the pandemic, would have been in the summer of 2019. But we did.
Yep.
Patrick, our young brother, who's a welder out in our shop, he ran it quite a bit around Kennedy Tank. We have a 21-acre property, about 110,000 square feet under roof that we fabricate in, and we have a big oval, of course, around buildings. And Patrick was whipping it around this summer because it had been since the summer of 2019 since we had actually driven it and put miles on it. And Patrick's going to carry that legacy forward. Real passionate about it. He works with Bill Yazel, who's our one of our maintenance men on the car, and Pat has learned a lot about it, and he just drives it very fast around our property.
My next question is, when that thing comes back out, who's driving it? I think there's an answer to that.
Patrick is. Okay. And we hadn't touched on this, but so Jimmy's our great vice president of sales at Kennedy Tank. I'm the president of the 3 businesses. Patrick was a really good basketball player at Chittard. Then he went to the Kelly School in Bloomington with us, was a fraternity brother of ours, and he studied finance. And all through schooling, starting at a very young age, Pat was always the most naturally and hardest working student, a very high IQ student, got really good grades, didn't quite get in Notre Dame, but got close. And he did a sales job right out of college, and he didn't like it. It just didn't fit him. And he wanted to do something with his finance major that he could, at the end of the day, be proud of what he did and what he built. So he started welding for us on nights. We used to do day shift, night shift. Now we've moved everyone to days. But Pat would do his sales job and then spend about 4 hours at Kennedy Tank learning how to weld. And he had no welding experience. No one in the Kennedy family had welded since our great-grandfather. And Pat joined us full-time as a welder out in the shop. Joined us on days, was on the structural section, so a lot of flux-core fillet welds, and was learning, and doing really well. Then Dad and I wanted him to go get a welding degree from Hobart Institute of Welding's 9-month structural program in Troy, Ohio. And Pat went and did that on nights for 9 months, and then came back in our shop, and he's been with us a total of 7 years. He's one of the guys, Boilermaker in the shop, welding for us, treated exactly like everyone else. And it's just so wonderful to have, a guy in the family, in the fifth generation, that is just one of the guys fabricating in the shop, working hard, bell to bell, showing up at 5:30, working until 4 p.m. or 5:30 p.m. And Jimmy's doing a great job in sales, managing sales and estimating. I, since Dad passed, had to step up into the president role. But to have a fifth generation with this growing company that has family members in all different levels of the organization has just been awesome for us.
Yeah. What do we need to do to get that car back on the track, though?
So we're going to work
Doug Bowles, if you're watching.
We love Doug.
Pat will wear a blue suit in your honor if we can get the car back on the track.
Yeah.
Is it worthy? Like, is it? It sounds like it's roadworthy enough that if you wanted to take, to participate in the, was it the SRVA or the vintage automobile racing is? I don't know if they.
We're going to get it out there. The most proud moment we've been of the car was on the 100th running of the Indy 500. I forget the year Rossi won, maybe 2015 or 16, whatever year it was. My dad gets a call at 10 p.m. and they had, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, my dad, of course, would know, but I believe they had 33 cars before the race, say 2 or 3 hours before the race, do parade laps. Yeah. And it was the most 33 or however many most famous cars that they had. And one of them, they could not get there. And they figured this out at 10 p.m. that night.
The night before the race?
The night before the race. So they call Doug and their team, call my dad, who was laying in bed. Obviously, we try to go to bed early the night before the race since we're up at 3 a.m. And my dad works with Bill Yazel, our maintenance guy, the legend, and they pull an all-nighter. And because it's really hard, like at 6 a.m., you never could get that truck and trailer with the car in it to the right location to be able to do laps on the track. So they pull an all-nighter, get it to IMS at 2 a.m. the morning of the race, and Sam Hornish Jr., and we're all there, 70 of us sitting together, and we're cheering on our car, the Kennedy Tank Special, being driven by Sam Hornish Jr.
That's pretty cool.
2 hours before the 100th running. So that was a really proud moment.
Awesome.
That is awesome. I recall the vintage race cars going around. That was one of the cooler parts of obviously the 100th running, and obviously everything was a little bit extra for that race, and that was awesome to see. Yeah. I mean, you go to the museum, which I love going to, and you can see it, but then to actually see it, the fact like, oh my gosh, there's like the Marmon Wasp, it's actually running.
Yes,
like, that's pretty cool.
There actually is a photo of Sam Hornish Jr. I believe waving to Parnelli Jones, who is driving the Marmon Wasp, that sits right in our lobby. A picture you can see the special in that beautiful car.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you guys bringing these books in. This reminds me, one of my last experiences with your dad was we were out at the track for, was it the ABC did a day at the track, that ABC group. We were out there with our dad, and sometime, this is end of the night, practice is already over, but we're sitting in the Speedway Motel.
The flag room, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sitting there in the bar, having another cocktail that none of us needed, talking about just race history, and you're basically it's like pulling your dad's string and just letting him go, and we're just sitting here just kind of absorbing all this stuff, which was a pretty cool experience. Final question I've got for you guys is on the business side. The next generation has thoughts on the business. Most of them are not what we call cruise control guys. We want to make our own stamp. We don't just want to be looking like as silver spoon kids that just kind of put it on cruise control and go with the flow. What would you guys say is going to be your stamp? What do you think will be your stamp to take Kennedy Tank to the next level?
So we, through our businesses, we had the busiest year we've ever had in 2022. We worked about 370,000 labor hours at our 3 manufacturing shops and our field division when you combine it all. And what Jimmy and I and our exec group and the family always talk about is we want to incrementally and successfully grow and work more hours, employ more people, and keep moving our business in the right in the right direction incrementally. And 2 ways we're doing this at this time is we have 2 big construction projects going on, both at Kennedy Tank at Staffco. Staffco, we're building an indoor blast building so we can put a nice profile on the tanks before we paint the tanks. Since 1952, we've sort of been doing that half outside, half in a shed, but now we're going to have a new beautiful building that will allow us to do it inside before we push the tanks into the paint building. And at Kennedy Tank, we have Force Constructions helping us with a about 60 by 100 foot large fabrication building that our field division is going to use to build mechanical piping projects and also do ASME and tank repair and shell and tube heat exchanger repair. So a part of that incremental growth is having enough square footage space to be able to build what we build. And we have 2 nice sized construction projects going on now. But I don't think this generation's really focused about recreating the wheel or changing too much. It's just we have great people, like Jimmy said. We love our people. They love us. They all have very long tenure and stay with us for their careers for the most part. And we just want to give our people all the tools we can to be successful. My dad's biggest motto was we win as a team, we lose as a team. And we really believe in sharing the year-end results with our teammates who are making the results happen. And it's one of the big reasons we have such good, dedicated employees. So I'd say this generation wants to incrementally grow like we have been and give our team the resources they need to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's very well said there. I think the only thing I'd add is, a part of our stamp will just be how we treat people. I mean, as Bill mentioned, you're with the people you work with more than you're with your family. Right. I think we brought kind of more of a focus on the whole person, not just the person at work. And, that culture's developed, honestly, on a minute-by-minute, hourly basis, and you can lose it, honestly, on a minute-by-minute basis. So it's continuing that focus. It's really, thanks to Bill, Dan Yoder, our team, we dove extremely deep in technology. I mean, we literally have gone from whiteboards to touchscreen monitors all throughout our facility that has made us just a ridiculous amount of more efficient. So I think the technology is big, but I also think how we treat people and obviously the controllables, effort, attitude, which were, a big part of my dad's philosophy as well, will always be a key.
Yep. Awesome. Any questions you guys have for us?
I was hoping you'd give us that. What are some advice you two would have for, you guys can remember back when you were 34,
Barely.
You guys have a lot of great experiences in your careers. What advice would you give to guys like us?
Well, I'm sure that first one with anybody deciding to come into a family business to make sure they go elsewhere first, just to kind of, get their feet wet. My big thing is I'm never satisfied. And so that was kind of where that last question stemmed from, is trying to figure out what is that stamp that we can put on the business. And Joe and I have talked, numerous times about where do we want to take the company. And it's not just, taking what Dad had done and just kind of riding that, but taking it and building on that. So I don't know that's necessarily advice. It's just kind of this school of thought, this attitude, if you will, that I think people going into regardless of what generation it is, into a family business needs to have that attitude of pressing forward. Don't sit back. We all know the only constant in life is change, right?
Right.
And so just because the company's been successful the last 100 years doesn't mean it's going to continue for the next 100. You've got to continue to adapt and figure that out. And if that means taking it up a notch, then so be it.
Wow. So I'll be 45 in a couple of weeks. So 11 years ago would have been 2012-ish. So we were, I joined the business right before the Great Recession hit. And it's kind of funny. I came to the business. I joked I was guilted into the family business because no one just joins the coatings industry. You kind of get sucked in. And then once you're in, you're never spit back out. But I joined with the idea of going back to graduate school and getting my MBA, and then being part of at that time, a much smaller family business during that span of the recession. Like, I feel like I earned my master's about 5 times over.
Right.
And so 2012, we were outside the recession, but the wound is still, I still have that emotional scar, I think. But in 2012, growth coming out of that time period was really, really small. And very incremental because of a lot of the regulations of the government. In most cases, rightfully so, but in plenty of cases, kind of probably overdid some of the regulation to really kind of inhibit that economic rebound of coming back up above whatever equilibrium was at that time. So I look back and I would probably tell myself at that time that number one, it's going to be hard. Number two, don't quit. And the third thing I would tell myself would be just whatever decisions that are going to be made, be really, really stubborn and borderline hard-headed on them. Like if you're going to make a decision, believe in it. That doesn't mean don't be open to feedback or open to other people's opinions when making the decision, but once it's made, believe that you've made the right decision. And I think for the most part, over the last 10 plus years, we've more than quadrupled in size. We've had some acquisitions. We've grown people. And similar to your story, we have a lot of people that have been with us for a very long time. When we interview people, we have a question that says, how long do you want to keep this job? And my hope is that people say, well, I want to work here till I retire, because our hope when we hire someone, no matter what level that's at, that they say, wow, this is a great company. We want to be a lifer. If we can continue to see that, I mean, that's the true feedback, right? If you're doing the right thing as a manager and creating a safe environment for people to thrive, if people keep coming back year after year, then you know you're doing something right. If you have a lot of turnover, maybe you need to do some serious self-reflection on what kind of business you're running. But those kind of three things are what I probably would have, told my 34-year-old self.
Yeah, it's great stuff. That's great. Yeah, thank you guys.
I can't remember when I was 34. It's been a while.
Well, unfortunately, IU has not won a national championship since you turned 34.
Well, it's funny. My oldest child was maybe like a few days ago, or maybe last week. I can't remember. IU had lost. The Colts lost. Like all of our teams kind of are in just the dumps. And he's like, man, why does Indianapolis sports or Indiana sports have to suck so bad? I was like, I remember when IU won its last national championship. I was really young. I mean, I was 9 when IU won in '87, but I remember when they went to the national championship in 2001. I had just graduated, but I went back to Nick's in Bloomington to watch the game.
Oh, great.
I remember obviously the Colts winning the Super Bowl and going to a second Super Bowl and all that stuff. And he looked at me, he's like, oh, you're so old. Like, you're just so old and terrible. I was like, yes, I know, I'm wretched.
Yeah. So, not to go crazy on Bloomington, but Jimmy and I's first 4 years, our 4 years at Bloomington were Tom Crean's first 4 years at IU. So the first year, we were the worst basketball team in the history of the world. Second year, got a little bit better, but I think we only won one Big Ten game. It was still really rough. Third year, finally won like 4 or 5 Big Ten games and showed some promise, won a couple big ones in our junior year. Then senior year, thank God, we'll never forget when Cody committed to IU. We really desperately needed him. He committed. We had a really good year. We beat... we went from winning 1 or 0 Big Ten games our freshman year to beating Kentucky at home and storming the court. We were at the Sweet 16 Kentucky game where Kentucky had shot 65% from the free throw line that entire year, and then they go 94% with 31 free throw shot against us to beat us narrowly in Atlanta. We were at that one and just love IU. Want us to get back to the top, like where we should be, and we think Woody's going to do it.
Well, good. Well, there you have it, folks.
Yep.
All right. That concludes another episode of the Industrious Podcast. We appreciate you guys for tuning into this episode. If you happen to be watching on the Accessa YouTube channel, thank you for doing so, and hit that little notification bell so you can be alerted when new episodes like this one drop. Thanks, guys, for listening, and don't forget, be industrious.